Welcome to another show and episode of To Customer Value and Beyond. We're super excited to have you with us today. We have not stuck to our weekly schedule as planned usually, but as you saw, we had a bit of a rebranding to do. So we're quite excited to share that with you, as you all saw. And we want to announce that we will also tie these shows to an in-person event series. We're going to start in Berlin and hopefully in other places soon as well. So be excited around some news there. And we will do our best to stick to our weekly schedule again as well. We're going to share a link to our community page afterwards. There will also be a Slack community attached to that for our conversations that we started here to continue. And going to share that afterwards. So today, as usual, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Jim, who I just very much surprised by adding him to the show unannounced. So welcome, Jim. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Stephen. Happy to be here. I love that intro music. It is so soothing to the soul.
Yeah, at some point we need our own. I think we need someone to actually play something for us. We have to decide for an instrument, though. I'm undecided between a harp and a violin. So
I play a mean kazoo.
Nice.
Oh yeah, get busy.
I could add a bit of beatboxing, but it's not good.
Oh, I would love to hear that.
Okay. All right. And we have a very exciting guest today, someone we both know quite well from a previous career, someone who's pretty unique, I think, in his field about the collection about the experience he accumulated. So from being an expert in engineering, being a very early employee engineer in a startup that actually became a unicorn at some point. So we might have been part of some of that journey as well. So without further ado, we're welcoming to the stage Stefan Krumnow from Berlin. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you, and love that t-shirt, Jim.
Oh yeah.
Finally, we got you.
Get up with the deer. Fear the deer, baby.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to dress. Oh.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
But you have the color as well. So
yeah, almost. Yeah.
Nice. Stefan, how are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. And I had an idea. Instead of beatboxing yourself, maybe you should use an AI beatbox or something. That could work.
That's a good idea.
I think many podcasts are doing that now. AI intro music.
I think that's very smart. Just today, I saw people announcing an event with AI generated pictures of the crowd. So basically just simulating the crowd that might be there in the future. And the second one was a company announcing their new assistant avatar. They will add to like all the posts, like the virtual like marketing assistant manager. So yeah, we might have missed a trend there. Jim, why are you?
Did all the AI participants, were they all holding cell phones, not paying attention to anything that was being said on stage? Because that would be pretty accurate.
That would be accurate.
That's true. That's true. I might comment that somewhere. So, Stefan, you had an illustrious career. You already had an amazing impact on, I would say, the German tech space with all you've done. Some people might not even be aware the amount of stuff you've done for that. But not talking about your CV, not talking about your background. What is maybe something we might not have seen in your background, we might not have seen in your LinkedIn history, something that might surprise us a bit?
Yeah, I was thinking, because I know you asked that question often in the beginning, and I came to the point that maybe this picture behind me is something that people don't know, because I am actually the artist that did that, half at least. So we had a colleague at the shared company that Jim had on his t-shirt, right? Signavio, Tommy Canso, who was famous for producing these type of pictures. We had them all around the office, right? And at some point he started selling them, and then COVID hit, and he was thinking about, I think, ways to connect to people. And so he came up with the ideas that we could just draw them as an event, or paint them as an event in his lab. So this is I don't know, 5 kilograms of 5 liters of paint You have
Wow.
it like a layer cake of paint that's being poured into a bucket, and then you have the canvas, and then you pour the bucket over the canvas, and this structure appears, right? Because it was layered before, so the layers kind of flow onto the canvas. That's the technique that he uses. And I'm a fan, and I have it in my office, my home office.
Nice.
Do you have a name for the painting, Stefan? Do you call
No,
it
I didn't
something?
give it a name. It kind of reminds me a bit of, like, I don't know, Jupiter or something, right? Like
it looks like a
gas
Amazon
giant
river.
Yeah, some people also said that, right? Like a I don't know, a delta or something of the river. But for me, it's more like a gas giant.
Is opal also opal in English? Because my grandma used to collect these stones, right? Which also had these blue-greenish.
Opal?
colors.
Opal?
Yes, opal.
Yes. Okay.
I think my biggest contribution was selecting the colors, and then because you have to mix the colors with some oily, I don't know what the exact ingredient is, right? So that it kind of layers, and that was like a ton of work. And at that time, I had a broken finger, so my hand became very tired at some point. But it was amazing. It was a good experience. So if you're listening to this, thank you, Tommy.
Tommy's the best. I know his art was quite sought after I think some office changes happened. So I guess there are a few lucky people out there who have some Thomas Kanzo art in their offices and living rooms now. So yeah, hit him up if you want to find him. Great art. And by the way, this is a whole new level of collaboration, right? So I would guess that was not at the high time of COVID, where you weren't allowed to leave your apartment, so probably at a lighter phase. But I love this collaborative art. I think we haven't had so far.
Berlin never had a "you're not allowed to leave your apartment" rule, right? Berlin had a curfew. That was, I think, the worst part.
True.
And 15 kilometers around your city of residence or something like that rule. But you were always allowed to go out and even meet in small groups. So. But we had to go to a shop, right? So that shop had to have open, and I think there were some restrictions.
Yeah, true. And I think for some time you weren't allowed to leave your state, right? So in Berlin, where you quickly leave your state, I think that was prohibited. Nice, perfect. So tell us about it. What have you learned from this experience? So creating art collaboratively, was there like some deeper meaning or some experience you took over into your management career?
I mean, teamwork, right? Not that I didn't know it before, but working together and bringing expertise and maybe eagerness together can yield a lot of good results.
Nice. Fun fact, by the way, I think
into a management speak.
Absolutely. And I think fun fact is how many years did we share an office? I think 4 or 5 years, right? So we basically sat next to each other. So yeah, that was a great experience. We still talk. We still appreciate each other's companies. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, even voluntarily, right? So
absolutely. And Jim was our best excuse to travel to Boston, the beautiful city of Boston. So thanks, Jim. Thanks for providing us with that.
I didn't create Boston. I just happen to live there. But you're welcome.
You didn't build that airport?
No. If
you built the baseball stadium, right?
No, I didn't do that either. My grandfather did, though.
Oh God, thanks.
That's not true. No. So Stefan.
Yeah.
I know, Stephen, you talked about unique experiences, and I think Stefan has kind of a great perspective coming from you in customer success. I think you were VP of customer success. I forget your title, but now you're VP of engineering at SAP. Talk a little bit about that, because I think you have a unique perspective where you've been customer facing, but now you're leading an engineering team. Like, talk about how you've taken those maybe customer success chops and lended those skills and that perspective in terms of leading an engineering organization.
Yeah. So I think it's one of like I did this switch in the same organization, right? So I switched from engineering to customer success, or basically all of post sales and Signavio, and then back 7 years later. And probably one of the reasons why this was possible is because it was the same organization. And so I was familiar with the product, the domain, the customer base, the market. But in the end, those are like two sides of the same coin, right? So we were a SaaS company, or we still are. So building and rolling out a SaaS product, and ultimately we share the same objective. And bringing these worlds together was always something that was very important for me, no matter on which side of the coin I kind of resided at that point in time, right? So when I was in the go-to-market organization, I considered myself kind of like the first ambassador to the engineering and then the product and engineering organization when we started to build up also product management, because we could bring customer feedback from our support team, customer feedback from our success team, and channel that and influence the roadmap of Signavio. While then on the other side, I could use all that knowledge that I had about the market and all the knowledge that I had about the customer base in upskilling the organization, right? Because engineering teams often suffer from being too far away, in my opinion, from the customer, from the market. They have to juggle with so many different things, especially in an enterprise setting, right? I mean, there's the technology, there's all the security, the processes, stuff that need to be adhered to. Then you have super challenging roadmap commitments. Maybe you talk to one or two customers, but talking with the breadth of the market and understanding that as an engineering team can be very overwhelming. And so that was something that I really took it as part of my mission when I went back into engineering, to make sure that I can upskill and connect the worlds better.
Nice. And I think Signavio was in a way pretty special about how well the different teams work with each other, right? So how like these interdisciplinary connections kind of worked. And I think a big part of that was also that the fluctuation was quite low in the beginning, right? So a lot of the early on, even the students from the student project, right, and the early employees kind of grew with the company and kind of stayed there, some until today, right? So many until today. So how did you use, adding to that, maybe some specific ideas, frameworks, or ways of working to actually allow the engineering teams to and the CS teams and the sales teams to be curious about what's happening in the other teams, right? Or how to, I don't know, bring them closer together? Was there something specific that was done, or was it just happening naturally?
I think I mean, naturally, maybe. I think this is always like a result of leadership, and I don't even mean myself, right? I mean particularly our founders back then, that created a culture of collaboration and of helping each other out, right? That always worked, in my opinion, really well. So there was always a good vibe between the teams, even if sometimes one team may see the other team as the root cause of a problem. In the end, these people came together and they talked, right? And I think nurturing that type of culture was very important. But then beyond culture, you can do a lot, yeah. So when I was in go-to-market, right, we had this concept, for example, customer of the month, that we used to create customer empathy in the overall organization, right? Not just with the go-to-market organization, but also with the product and engineering organization, where we tried to curate customer stories in a way that they can be consumed easily, but also to bring the customer closer to the people that are in the office, right, and who are not out there in the field. It had the nice side effect that we had to become more diligent about our own data, right? So, Stephen, I remember every month I came to you and I said, hey, we need a nicely curated customer story. So please make sure that we have these customer stories ready. But then we had them on the screens, right? As a PowerPoint slide written, we had them on the screens throughout the office. And so, yeah, we created that type of empathy. Or we had it was rather small, but we had this exchange program, right, between our our support team and our engineering team, where we said, hey, if you want to sit with our support team for some time, or if we want to put a support engineer next to an engineering team, so they see how the work of the other team works, and then B, they can contribute, right? So they join the ceremonies, like the dailies or whatever, and they can give perspective there. So it's a mix of culture and particular programs that you put in place.
And I think since you mentioned these success stories, I remember a process we implemented back then, which also involved multiple stakeholders, also from sales enablement, everybody, which I think it didn't really have a name, maybe success story process, where we made sure that there was a win story from sales, right? A dragon story then that was a bit bigger, a bit more dramatic about the impact that we might have. And then the success story in the end that would be published. And I think that until today is still one of the strongest processes in that aspect I have seen, right? So having spoken to many companies and seeing a lot of those, still many struggle and just like have not yet introduced a process that just continuously takes that information and creates this like success story machine. So yeah, I think you had also a big impact on also creating that back in the day. And did that, for example, also help the engineering teams to understand more of the impact, or did you see another value of those also for other teams than go to market?
So I think it particularly helped go to market, honestly. However, we over time got better at understanding these value drivers, right? So at some point we even did a project with a large analyst firm, right? And we said, hey, can we quantify the customer value together? And out came the biggest value drivers that they would see in our customer base, and that then tied back into our product strategy ultimately, right? So it took a few iterations, and iterations in strategy are long, like normally yearly. But we are using findings from that time still today in our product strategy, and we use them as the overarching objectives when we build more software, right? So there's always these two, like elevation levels, right? One is the strategic one, and then one is more on the knowledge one. I think these type of exercises, they really influence our strategy making.
So Stefan, I know the crap that GTM folks talk about engineering, and not because they dislike engineering, but they get a lot of pressure from customers, right? And typically what happens is that pressure gets pushed somewhere else, right? And it gets pushed on the product teams and engineering. So I know what's said there, and I don't think it's malicious. Again, I just think it's customer pressure. What's some of the crap that engineering says about the go-to-market folks? What do they think about us?
I think in general, at least the engineers that I met, they are rather welcoming to go-to-market folks and like working with them, right? Because you guys are a way to get to the customer. You guys are a way to get more insights into what's happening out there. And many engineers, I mean, they build a product because they want it to be used, right? And so you're kind of the proof point. At the same time, like if you like maybe one of the or a few of the less valued qualities is that sometimes stuff is thrown over the fence maybe a bit too early, right? Maybe you get these long email chains, and then it's just a question about, hey, what is being asked? But why has that email like especially with an account manager for 2 weeks, and now I'm getting it, and there was no interaction ever since? So couldn't that person have figured that out themselves in the meantime? Overall, I think the talk is more positive about the other side in engineering than on the go-to-market side, right? And that also has to do with, the individual account situation and the pressure that an account worker is on, because you have to fix a particular situation with a particular account at a given time, right? While an engineer or an engineering team is normally like a cross-functional team, they have to think like broad, right? And they ideally, I tell my engineering teams, don't think about one customer, think about all of them, right? Think about the market, think about the future customers. So they don't face that much pressure from an individual point, right? It's kind of buffered by you. And so I think there's empathy for that.
Okay. So what, I mean, I know companies often struggle with the whole feedback loop, right? And, how do you collect that information? How do you prioritize it? And how do you build products that aren't just for one customer, that are for all customers, to your point? So if you're building a utopian feedback process, like what does it look like? How would engineering want to receive that information so that it's insightful, it's actionable?
And that's a great question, because I think the right mix of data in that process is the key, right? Like you can basically collect every piece of information that you have, and then it takes you more than a year to go through a yearly strategy cycle. So you need to be very good at picking the right elements of data and talking also to the right people, because like the bigger your go-to-market organization is, the more you have different viewpoints, because I don't know, people are, I don't know, maybe the market in India at the moment looks completely different from your market in the US because of certain regulatory environments. And so if you sample this wrongly and you talk to the wrong people for too long, or you take that in, you create an overbalance, right? So you have to look at quantitative and qualitative feedback, right? Speaking to the individuals, speaking ideally also to the people that have like a broader view. Pre-sales is normally a very good source, in my opinion, because they see the post and the pre-sales side. They see more than just a few opportunities, and they suffer through many of the challenges in the POC phase. So talk to your pre-sellers and your pre-sales leaders. Basically, what bubbles up to them is very very valuable input. Look at important metrics yourself, right? So you have adoption and engagement metrics on your software. Which features are being used? Why are they used, right? It can be that a feature is used a lot because the feature is really, really badly designed, and because it's really badly designed, it takes so much time to use it. So you also need to be very careful with your hypothesis that you use there. Look at your metrics like an NPS. It's a very strong metric. Particularly if you add, like, I don't know, a feedback box next to the rating. So kind of like go through all these comments. Nowadays, probably with AI, you can have sentiment analysis on the comments, and it's easier to pick the ones that are really critical of what you're doing. And then lost deals, lost customer type of analysis is very important. But you need to have very, very broad thinking persons to do this type of analysis, right? Not to jump into wrong conclusions. Always challenge your own hypothesis. It's very challenging work. And again, right, you have to pick the data, and you have to also know when to stop.
And I think we should mention, right, that you were also the one that introduced like this pre-sales function back in the day, right? So when I think a very strong function at the company back in the day was also the pre-sales function, where you hired some excellent people who then developed it further, right? But you were the one that started it out by seeing that sales required that support, which also to this day is actually a discussion I oftentimes have, that it makes a huge difference what type of like B2B SaaS solution you're talking about, whether you require pre-sales, value engineering, and some other roles like that, right? Depends on the complexity. And I think we've even been quite early with things like also introducing, after seeing the necessity for it, the success engineering, right? Where we saw that, okay, it also takes a toll if you then take this great pre-sales team, but kind of put them into this conflict of interest situation where they have to work on new opportunities, right, to also make their quota and everything, but then customer success and services and professional services all need support as well because they're so great. I think that should be mentioned, right? And maybe can you explain when kind of this thing happened, right, where you noticed, okay, we have a good sales team, we have a solid sales team, we're doing good things on the sales process, but we need this, a team I love to this day, we need this pre-sales team where basically the whole company can just benefit from?
Yeah, I think we saw that our sales motions became more strategic with the customers, right? And we we started to sell in an enterprise way, and that meant that the profile of the seller was changing away from a person that would show you the functionality to an account executive that would talk to you about the value and would connect to a ton of different stakeholders within the company and really figuring out what these people need. So that opened the gap for demos, for proof of concept projects. Also, the deals got bigger, right? So the complexity of everything that had to be proven prior to the deal, it increased. And the only people that we had at that point in time that could do that were some of the success managers in your team, Stephen. And we figured out that for some reason, specifically with quarterly sales pressure, new customer opportunities always trumped existing customer value realization, which is a short-term optimization, right? And so we countered that by really splitting the team, giving every individual the chance to pick where they want to be, and then growing it from there. And I think it was really a good decision back in the day. And as I said, we built up a really strong pre-sales team.
Nice. Thanks for that openness and transparency also, right? Because it's oftentimes also especially for other founders and managers, super interesting how you actually got started considering that. And I have just remembered something actually from today. Some hours ago, I talked to the CEO of a very exciting German B2B SaaS company as well, where we talked a bit about some of the things they consider continuing or stopping doing with their existing customer base. And one thing that came up, and I'm super curious about your opinion, because I might remember some discussions we had on that many years ago, was that they have an open roadmap on their customer page, right? So customers can access the roadmap all the time. Jim, you might love this topic as well. I think you might have been part of it.
Stefan started squirming in his chair, by the way, when you mentioned that. Do you notice he shifted? He got a little uneasy.
But I have some addition. Adding to that, not just the roadmap, but also a way to add feature and function wishes, like basically a wish list where you can add features and functionality you want to have in the product. So both. What do you think about these things nowadays? Do you have an opinion on both topics?
Yeah, it's an amazing question, and I have like literally two hearts when I think about that question, because I understand why. And I mean, we have open roadmap on open, right? I mean, open for customers. So we publish a roadmap with our customers.
Thanks for that.
I understand why.
Open.
Yeah, open. Yeah, not public, but open. I understand why customers want to see roadmaps, right? They want to understand the direction the product is taken. They even in many situations, you want to understand, hey, this problem that I'm having at the moment, will it be solved in half a year? Then I can wait. If not, then I need something like an alternative solution, right? So it's kind of a like planning a bit into the future, right? So go to market, Stefan really thinks this type of information is really important. Engineering, Stefan really believes that a now next later type of roadmap is actually the best approach, right? Because otherwise, normally feature development stops time bound and not scope bound and value bound, right? So we're kind of limiting ourselves if we say, hey, every product needs to have 4 releases in a year, and then there need to be new features. There need to be features in every quarter. And so we just build a feature and then we move on to the next feature and the next feature, the next feature, instead of really after the quarter realizing we just unlocked a lot of value, but there is also a lot of value to still be unlocked. And we now reprioritize. We had this idea that we're going to maybe build in another direction afterwards, but this is where we should be at the moment. We do a reprioritization and we do something else instead. And that screws with that picture, right, that I published to a customer. So I'm all for as much transparency as possible with a customer. They need to understand in which areas are we investing, but they also need to understand how we make decisions, right? And in the end, it's in the interest of an average customer when we make a reprioritization, because we always make them with the market in mind. And even if we reprioritize something that helps ourselves to become more efficient or whatever, that ultimately benefits the majority of our customers, because that is always what we have in mind when we prioritize. It may be super disappointing for an individual customer, and this is where the conflict lies between these two things, right? But the agility of deciding or course correcting or course setting in shorter intervals, I think, is scientifically proven, even by all the work that, I don't know, the Google guys are putting out around small releases, MVPs, and iterating on them. It requires, however, a very strong collaboration practice, I think, and also a lot of diligence, because if something does not work, you also want to be able to take it off again, right? And you want to be able to put your bet somewhere else, and then your contracts even have to be designed in a way that this is allowed. So very complicated topic. We could probably do a whole episode around that.
Yeah. Well, by the way, for all the guests and attendees, right? So this will go on for another 3.5 hours. So we will continue that discussion. So stay tuned. No, just joking. But speaking about this, right? I remember that I think we were quite innovative about that as well, right? So nowadays I see a lot of companies considering how to tie that to customer value, how to tie that also to customer personas, right? What's the value they gain? And I think this was also from your teams quite advanced in already considering that, right? Not thinking about feature functionality, not thinking just about what the product does, but really already thinking about, okay, who benefits from that, right? What is like the value of that? How, let's think about what customers might want to gain with that. And I think that was already quite advanced back in the day. So yeah, hats off for that.
There are whole roles around this in engineering teams, right? I mean, you have the product owner, product manager role, where the playbook says, hey, they're closer to the customer than the actual go-to-market team. You have designers that figure these type of things out in user research, figuring out best ways to address then the problem. So once the value driver is identified and the problem is defined, then the user stories are being generated, right? So there's a process around these type of things. So I think there are a lot of companies who do that really well, actually.
Yeah, and that's actually, you kind of, I was going to speak about that, ask you specifically about that. When we talk about value realization in value frameworks or value maps, you've been on both sides. You've been on the GTM side, you've been on the engineering side now. What's your thoughts on, like, how is that conceptualized and created? But not only that, how does it actually permeate throughout the company so that you're all in lockstep in terms of not only delivering that message, but actually looking at customers in terms of how they're doing to realize that value or get those results?
Yeah. So from a go-to-market point of view, I think this is a lot about like playbooks, and enabling your people in the field around these type of drivers, what they mean, how to sit down from a process point of view with your customer, identifying which of the value drivers are the important ones, and then creating a process of checking that over time. While for an engineering and a product team, this is more like a North Star, right? Something to direct your thinking every now and then, and make sure you challenge yourself, right? Because the nature is a bit different. It's not as, I don't know, as specific or as transactional with one customer. It is more strategic work, right? Something that an engineering team works on today will influence revenue in a year from now. Something that a CSM or a seller is working on today is normally influencing revenue today.
So like, we're in the go-to-market teams, especially the customer success teams, we're always trying to get our hands on data that tells that story, right? That's ultimately, we want to look at that proactively.
Yeah.
And also not just us look at it, but we want to share that with customers, either through whatever kind of digital channels or in app. Does your engineering team, do you take a look at that and see how current customers are doing, to give you any perspective or to help you make some decisions in terms of where you're going to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you would ask many engineers in many organizations, they will probably tell you they don't have enough data. But so there's a craving for working with data, but absolutely this is an important piece, right? Many decisions are done more anecdotally in many organizations, but if you have a chance to look at data, I think you should always do it, and many people in engineering teams do it, and then they do it on multiple levels, right? So the way an engineering organization normally is structured is you have interdisciplinary Scrum teams, and they work on a particular domain, right? So if your product is, I don't know, LinkedIn, you have a couple of teams that are working on the feed together. So some people will be around how a post is displayed. Another team will be around the algorithm. Another team will be on the reaction feature, and then you have other completely different areas, I don't know, that take care of the my profile page, right? And so all these teams, they will be looking at their respective data, right? So for example, if like LinkedIn had this feature I noticed where you could react in the messages feature, right? So you could give a thumbs up or a heart or something like that. And then suddenly it disappeared. So I assume they looked at the data, they had a certain hypothesis how well that should be adopted. They didn't see it being adopted, so they removed it again. All right, so those are decisions that you can take on a per team level, and then there are the bigger decisions where you look at the platform holistically, and for example, you realize that between the My Profile page and the feed, there is the navigation doesn't really work, right? And this is then a different set of data that someone looks at, more like, I don't know, a strategic designer or something like that will figure that out. And then ultimately, I don't know, you have people that look at the competitor, and you decide, hey, we need a video live feature now because other platforms added that. So this is maybe not a data decision, but the other two, they really relate to usage data that was collected. And again, the trick is to pick the right data, right, and the right hypothesis.
And I think that's so important what you said about also being aware and able on like a more tactical level, also sometimes to just test things out, right? Do A/B testing and then maybe just throw something away, right? And not be too proud of what you've just done. And I think this is what some of the strongest companies are quite good at, right? At just trying out things, but then also being quick to adopt to if it doesn't work. And maybe going into a bit of a similar direction. For probably everyone who's listening, who's more from the also go-to-market area, what is the area from your experience which is usually the most complicated and complex one that might be requested from customers? So speaking about like product areas, is it like reporting, dashboarding? Is it more like I don't know, general usage or usability topics? What is the area where you would basically cringe a bit and say, I would have hoped this meeting is about something else?
Yeah, it all depends on where you started, right? So a reporting feature may be super easy to build based on whatever architecture you picked. Let's assume you have all your data very nicely under control, and you can just pump it into a data lake and then use like an integrated reporting engine, and you're done. I think something that normally, especially when you're like a growing company, so I assume this is now like a startup that becomes more and more enterprise ready, right? The biggest things that cause a lot of work, or actually way more work than one would guess, is complying with certain standards that have not been foreseen in the software design, right? So certain ISO or SOC certifications, they come with like a lot of processes, controlled stuff that needs to be implemented, and it can all be done, right? It's no magic, but you really need to check your operating model then, and you're changing your processes, and potentially if you're doing it wrongly, you're slowing down. So this is the dangerous territory. But if you want to be enterprise ready, especially if you're handling sensitive data, you should go there, and maybe you should even go there early.
So Stefan, since AI is going to take all the engineering jobs, what are you going to do next?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to take all the engineering jobs. I heard the other day that Marty Kagan He's like a thought leader around how these product teams that I spoke about can work, right? These interdisciplinary teams that really own a certain part of your portfolio. And he predicts that the number of engineers will go down. And I think he's definitely right about that, right? You can create small front end. Like if your architecture is really, really good, you can automate a lot. You still need some engineers. These things are dreaming up complex structures. I think also we are hitting like a quality bump, at least at the moment, in terms of the LLM output, both in text and in in code. There is a certain complexity that they can handle nicely, and then there's another complexity that they can't. For a few years, probably very messy old code bases will remain a challenge for the LLMs. So maybe I just go to companies that have really old, messy code bases. But I honestly, I'm not even concerned about this from my point of view. We have so many areas, particularly in Germany, where we need to digitalize better and where companies are in need of better software, that even if we need only a third of engineers on a given topic, we still have enough work that needs to be done properly. And then the hard stuff will be integrating again, right? And the hard stuff will be that these systems talk to each other like reliably. And this is where we need humans at the moment.
And maybe a bit nerdy question, but it might help the audience also differentiate, because I think it makes also a huge difference if we talk about programmers or software engineers. Maybe you want to also clarify why that might be a difference, because from practical experience trying out some of these AI tools, some software engineering background or understanding is still helpful, even if an AI builds your product. So can you maybe explain what the difference for you is between a programmer and a software engineer?
I mean, an engineer is someone who thinks more holistic in the way I look at it, right? Like we don't just sit down, write a bit of code, execute it, and we are done, right? Like software engineering is a huge field. It starts with figuring out the overall system architecture. Then the smaller architectures. You need to think about your data structures. You need to think about reusable components, about the whole security around it. Yeah, of course. I mean, an LLM will give you some code. I've seen a couple of posts online now where people like bragged about the code that they wrote, and then their APIs got hacked. You have to think about these type of things. It's about the continuous improvement cycle. It's about the cost of ownership, right? The code needs to be efficient. It needs to be run on the right infrastructure. So it's an end-to-end thinking that you have with your software.
And responsibility, right? You mentioned something super exciting and thought-provoking, right? So also the question of responsibility, which comes across oftentimes, right? When you take decisions, especially with code and building products, you will not be able to blame ChatGPT or whatever tool you're using for a security breach, right? You will, at some point, somebody will ask you, okay, there was a security breach. What did you do to prevent that? And just saying, well, next time I'll do a better prompt, right, will probably not save your job, right? So also considering...
Also not your company, probably, right?
Yeah.
Like you should really not leak your customer data. If you're in B2B, it's probably the biggest sin that could happen to you.
Absolutely.
Stefan, what do you take more seriously? Engineering or your poker game?
So to those of you,
backstory is, want to tell the backstory of that?
Yeah,
should I
tell
tell?
So Jim, do you want to say it, please?
No, I like listening from you. You tell it better.
Okay, Jim, you once told me I was the least fun person to play poker with because it was a really messy round, and everyone was misbehaving, violating the rules, flashing the cards. Like
we were drinking beers and playing poker.
No, we were playing
the
poker.
People didn't even
exactly.
know how to play.
So I take my poker game a bit serious, I think. But ultimately, making sure that the software I'm working on is is reliable and secure is probably also like in spirit that maybe some people at my company or at future companies are watching this, is obviously something that I take more serious.
Depends on the manager that will hire you at some point, right? If he's a poker addict or she's a poker addict or a lover as well, right? It might be important to state that both have a significant stake and importance in your life. Yeah.
In general, I like things tidy.
I love it. Are there other games that we now spoke about a game like poker, right? Are there other things that you love doing? We talked a lot about like more professional technology stuff. What do you love doing next to your great engineering and tech career? What does Stefan do?
Not many other games, I must admit. I used to play a lot of games on my computer, on my PlayStation. I played many different board or card games over the time, but I think it's poker now, also given the limited amount of time. And I eat, I read, I cook, I travel, like the usual answers that people will give you. So poker is definitely the most exciting one that I can provide.
I don't, Stephen. Stephen asked if I had another funny one. I don't. No more funny anecdotal stuff.
I think that was a good one. But wasn't there something about sailing or boating? Because I remember there was something where I actually felt quite inspired back in the day. There was something about water.
I mean, in general, I love water. So I'm a member of a dragon boat club in Potsdam, which is a lot of fun, and you should join us once. We take newbies on probation trainings.
Oh, yeah.
So that is a really cool thing, because like being in a dragon boat, it's all about the rhythm, and it's like everything has to be in the same rhythm, right? And so if you're the one that cannot do it anymore, you still like clench your teeth and you do a few more strokes because you don't want to let the other ones down. So it's a good workout. And yeah, sailing is something I'm doing as well. A few of the other Signavio folks that I'm still in touch with, they talked me into a sailing trip this year. And we're actually going to do a sailing license on the Baltic Sea in May. It's going to be cold.
Where do you go? You just sail around, or like you have a destination? I don't know the Baltic Sea. What's in there? My geography stinks. Educate me on the Baltic Sea.
The Baltic Sea is basically like Eastern Germany going into Eastern Europe, right? You have Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Russia, all kind of neighboring it. I'm not really sure. It's a class, right? So we need to do a couple of miles, I think 300 miles. And it's about getting that license. So our coach will decide what we will do, where we will be, and how often we have the luxury of sleeping in a harbor versus out there in the sea.
Amazing. I hope you don't get lost, or any of the
I hope that too.
Of the cool group of people we all know and love get lost on this boating trip. So please make sure that you have enough vests, or I don't know, friendly dolphins around the boat that might save you. Or maybe I watched the wrong movies. Looking at the future, right? So we talked a bit about like AI and some of the stuff. Maybe to kind of come to a close, can you give us maybe an optimistic or some outlook where you feel like, especially for the areas you're interested in, the areas you worked in, where do you think are like the most, where's the most potential for technology, not just AI, right? We can talk about, I don't know, quantum computers, right? AI, whatever's on the horizon, right? Where do you see the biggest opportunity for your area of expertise, where you think, oh my, that will be exciting?
I'm not sure if it's exciting, but I really feel we are lacking so far behind on digitalizing many of the processes, both in the in some industries. Like, I don't know, look at construction, look at healthcare, at least in Europe. Look at all the public administration, right? There is so much room for improving the digitalization of processes there, that I think really, just by making engineers more productive and by making sure that like with the professionalization also of all of the data storages and stuff like that, that we can create central solutions where data can be stored in a secure way, that will bring us a long way as a society. Again, not the most exciting answer, but I think one that's really, really needed, because it sometimes feels like we're going in completely different paces when it comes to that, right? There are like big industry giants and cool startups are at the forefront, and then there's such a long tail on missing digitalization that we still have to approach.
And all is based on process, and you mentioned process, and I think even some of the best startups, small, medium, large tech, right? All of them, what they usually share is they have an understanding of process, document, and that allows them to be agile and scale. So whoever out there thinks startups don't need process to be agile, you might be mistaken. So check your process and at least write it down somewhere. You might need it at some point.
And figure out how to keep your data safe.
Absolutely. All right, Stefan, it was so great to have you. We are wishing you the greatest evening. We hope to have you back at some point. As I mentioned earlier, we might have in-person events and other events as well, and we might have people like Stefan there as well, so you might be able to meet him in person as well. So thank you for this. Thanks everybody else for joining, and yeah, we hope to see you in another future episode. And until then, let's stick to our saying, to customer value and beyond, and goodbye.
Thank you.